had an unlock with one of my clients, and she said, of all of the things that I've done in my professional career, and this has been like one of the most helpful things. And immediately I was like, really? This is your unlock? And it made me feel like, wow, maybe the impact that I'm having could be really big, right? Like maybe this is what I'm meant to do. And so I took a leap and I decided, you can always turn, the tables around. Like it's not a one-way door, right? You can drive down that path, and I never stopped driving.
Welcome to Success Leaves Clues, the podcast where we interview business owners on how they built their businesses and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is David Wynn, and I'm a business coach and the founder of Purple Circle, where we help business owners achieve their first 6-figure, 7-figure, and 8-figure year, all without sacrificing their quality of life. Before becoming a business coach and before founding Purple Circle, I started and scaled several 7- and 8-figure coaching businesses and have been a consultant at several businesses doing over $100 million each, including some that are publicly listed and doing over $1 billion each. In every episode of the podcast, you're going to learn lessons that took our guests years to learn, and you'll be able to learn that in minutes. No matter if you're a new business owner or an established business owner, every episode is going to give you the clues in order to elevate your business.
Welcome to Success Leaves Clues podcast. I'm Pedro, and today I'm joined by Andrea Morgan, who's a Denver-based startup executive coach and the founder of Morgan Advising, where she works with early and growth stage founders and executives on leadership clarity, resilience, and performance, grounded in neuroscience and behavioral science. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. Now I got to tell you something, Andrea. I'm kind of a comic book nerd myself, so I love the first editions, the origin story. And
Hmm.
so let's rewind a bit, because every coach has that moment when they look at their life and say, yeah, I guess this is what I'm doing now. Right. So when was
Hmm.
that for you?
Yeah. Um, Gosh, like most coaches, I think I have a bit of a convoluted path to get there. But the through thread was I always was very interested in human behavior, in what drives people, what motivates people, and sort of this biological basis of drive, right, of people. And that led me into, a personal journey through optimizing health, optimizing thought, optimizing emotions. In school, I studied cognitive and behavioral neuroscience, and that was a big unlock for me in sort of the way that I see people and the way that I see interactions. I was sort of suddenly entered into the startup world, and I was surprised to see that many of the executives and many of the founders that I was in these rooms with, it was much less the strategy that determined the success, and much more of whether or not the person driving the strategy could do that. And I realized that no matter what level you look at, everyone is sort of dealing with people issues, right? Of growth issues, of interaction issues, and it was fun to be able to sort of unlock that. So I started growing Morgan Advising, and people trusted me with their journeys, and I learned person over person sort of how I could help. And now here I am 8 years later, and I feel very fortunate to be part of these people's stories.
Interesting. Okay. Now, let me dive into a little bit of here what I call usually the identity shift when you started your own business, right? Like
Hmm.
myself, I'm a coach, right? And
Hmm.
I also have a corporate background, and a lot of coaches
Hmm.
do too. And sometimes it's almost like an identity shift when you're coming from a very structured world where you're like, well, work is just handed over to you, right? At least in
Yeah.
my perspective. And then you start your own business, and then you're wearing all the hats.
Hmm.
You're the marketer, you're doing business development, you're the sales, you're doing everything. So it's kind of a leap of faith in a way when you start your own journey in the entrepreneurship, right? So my
Hmm.
question to you is like, when did you felt the shift for Morgan Advising that you
Hmm.
realize, okay, this is not like a calling, this is not like I'm giving advice, this is a real business I'm building around coaching, you know?
Yes. Yes. The real business piece I think is very interesting because coaching often felt like a fake job to me for a while, right? And so I was working as chief of staff at a startup, aerospace startup called Boom Supersonic. and I was coaching. I was coaching on the side, and the coaching kind of felt like this, maybe like side advice, the side help, right? That I was doing, and I had an unlock with one of my clients, and she said, of all of the things that I've done in my professional career, and this has been like one of the most helpful things. And immediately I was like, really? This is your unlock? And it made me feel like, wow, maybe the impact that I'm having could be really big, right? Like maybe this is what I'm meant to do. And so I took a leap and I decided, you can always turn, the tables around. Like it's not a one-way door, right? You can drive down that path, and I never stopped driving. I absolutely found what I was put on earth to do.
I love that. I love how honest you are about it, because like at least on my perspective, it was like this. I was in corporate banking, then a consulting firm, Ernst Young here in Brazil, and I'm like, okay, that real job mentality you have in
Yeah.
that space. Oh, I have a real job, and then you're at a birthday party and someone asks you for 10 years, you're like, yeah, I do X, Y, and Z. I work at
Mm-hmm.
banking, I do it, and then you're in
Yep.
that in between phase that you're in the testing waters for coaching, and you're like, dude, what am I? It's almost like
Mm-hmm.
what's happening with me, right? So I love the fact that you call it felt like a fake job, because that hits home, at least for me. Okay.
I
Now,
think, and I wonder if other coaches struggle with this too. That fake
mm,
job makes you want to, or at least it made me want to search for credibility or credentials in it, right? It made me want to feel like I needed some sort of certification or some sort of validation from the outside in order to make it feel more real. And I think that the internal shift for me was really powerful in being able to look inside and say, like, this is actually just what I make it, and it is completely validated based off of its impact.
oh my God, you're gonna get me in a rabbit hole. I love it. Okay, the reason you're gonna, because here's the thing, right? I think you kind of nailed it. Because coaching, if you think about it, it's not a certified industry, regulated
Mm-hmm.
industry. It doesn't require that. You can
Mm-hmm.
coach without being an ICF coach, for example, or PCC, MCC, whatever. I mean, it's a credibility industry. But sometimes we kind of feel like sometimes we need the certification in order to justify the reason why we're doing what we're doing. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not mandatory. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Okay. Interesting. Nice. Okay. Now, I'm curious about one thing. After you started your business, I mean, that's 8 years ago, Morgan Advising, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an evolution of who you serve from the early days and who you
Mm-hmm.
serve now, potentially. I'm not saying that it is, but for me, in the coaching space, sometimes we're just trying to make it in the first years, and eventually we tend to attract a certain type of people that we realize, okay, I can help these people best. This is
Yep.
my tribe. So can you walk me through the evolution of who you serve and who you serve now?
I don't have such a stark evolutionary change in who I've served. So I've always served venture-backed startup executives and startup founders. I have, however, played around with different stages within that, and with different backgrounds, like first-time founders versus people who maybe started off in large executive roles and are founding now. And evolving through who I am most impactful to, I am most impactful to people who are hyper growing and challenging themselves to always continue to grow forward. And I find that early stage venture backed startup executives who have never done this before are the most hungry for the information. They're the most driven to grow, improve themselves, and shift. They don't have as many adoptions of the stale conventional wisdom of corporate America. And so they're not like taking those things with them as much. I love a founder that, was an individual contributing engineer, right? Who's having to step into this, CEO role and having to grow into that, right? I love that shift in job and that shift in self identity and challenging yourself to sort of find your own authentic voice in that version of you.
Ah, interesting. I wonder why the startups. I'm curious about that, Andrea. You mentioned something that caught my attention at the start. You want to understand why people have their drives, their whys. why they want to do X, Y, and Z. And the startups, I'm just wondering why them? Why not other types of founders? Why early stage venture backed startups, execs?
Yeah, I actually asked myself that last year. I have a friend who's in small business, and she said, "Do you think your work is applicable to me? Do you think you could help me with, the growth of my company?" And at first, I thought, "How could it be?" Right? Like I work in such a isolated world of pitch decks and like a whole different world. And so I tried, right? I took on a coaching role with her, and it was transferable. And I realized that I work on people, right, in leadership roles, but it's really I work on people, right? I create the space for them to grow and build their confidence and their voice and their leadership and heal the parts of themselves that inhibit those things, and that it's actually quite transferable. The startup world is exciting to me because the progress goes so quickly, and so I get to be part of these sort of like rocket ships that are blasting forward, and I think that disruption in the world is enjoyable to me to be part of. But the work is absolutely, it turns out, applicable across many different areas.
You know, on a side note here, my dad, he was a dean of a university here in Brazil, and they had this project, incubator project here, okay? And it was mainly startups, right? Tech side and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned something that's one of the reason I want to ask you. It's like he told me people in the startup world, they were so humble and they want to learn so much. It was
Mm-hmm.
so much easier talking with them comparing to his consulting firm that he ran privately, right? That it was like almost like a breath of fresh air talking
Mm-hmm.
with people that are like the ones you're talking to usually, and the ones he mentioned. Is that real? I don't want to label them as everyone is like that, but is that a pattern you see happening? Like it's an easy conversation, they're coachable, and that caught your attention in any way?
Yeah, they tend to be more relaxed in who they are. They tend to be, or I guess than like maybe a large company executive. Um,
Hmm.
they tend to they tend to be more casual in the way that they approach their growth, which I think is needed. A lot of this work requires you to be vulnerable, and if you are in a position where you can be, right, um, that's really the best way to do it. Uh, I worked with a couple executives that were former Amazon executives or former Yahoo executives, and there's an air of formality
Mm.
that they've learned that the startup executives don't have, and I enjoy working with that.
Okay. Yeah, I get you. I'm using my executive hoodie here, so I'm with those guys, obviously. Right? Okay. Well, although I work a suit and tie, but I prefer the hoodie. Okay. Now, moving forward, I'd love for us to do like a quick game of pretend. Okay. I want to pretend I'm one of those cool guys, chilled. I'm your ideal client profile. Your avatar,
Okay.
early stage, venture back, startup exec. Let's put it like that. So, first of all, how would I be able to find Morgan Advising, marketing wise?
So I think that the first place that people go in the startup world, it's a very community-based world. And so the first place that people go is through people they know, right? They're going to ask other founders, they're going to ask VCs that they know, right? They're going to ask their friends. And that has a lot to do with the fact that the community is very close knit. So majority of the people find me through referrals in that way. But I have had people that have just blindly found me on LinkedIn. And I always tell people when you find a coach, it's the coach client fit that matters. And so interview multiple. Do, a discovery call, a trial session, right, with three,
Hmm.
two, three, and find out who do you feel like you can really push through your own internal spider webs with, right? That you're not trying to prove something to, that you're not trying to show a polished version to. Because if you feel like you need to put on that mask, then that's not the right coach for you.
Interesting. Okay. Now, still in the same game of pretend. Okay. Let's
Okay.
say I was referred to work with Morgan Advising. Someone
Hmm.
told me, "Hey, you gotta meet Andrea. She's cool. She knows what she's doing." I'm like, "Okay, here we go." I reach out, right? I'm like, "Hey, Andrea, would love to
Yeah.
know more. How does it look like to work with you and all of that?" So we can speed up the sales process or not. Okay,
Hmm.
up to you. We can say there's alignment, but the real question I have for you is like, how does it look like to work with your business? Okay, a little
Hmm.
peek behind curtain and the outcomes I can expect.
Yeah. So I tend to work, so I work entirely off of Zoom, so I can reach anybody from anywhere. And that gives me the benefit of getting to work with people all the way from Silicon Valley to Oregon. I have people, talking to me. I usually do weekly cadence of calls, and we have sort of work in between that you'll be doing. The outcomes are vast depending on what it is you're working on. We could be working on something tactical, which is, how do I perform one on ones? How do I do a performance improvement plan for somebody who's failing? How do I fire a friend, right? Who helped me in this first early stage, right? I'm sideways on the vision with one of my co-founders. I'm sideways on roles, right? Right. Those are all very tactical leadership things that we can work through. And then also we can work through feeling like an imposter, right? In a sea of people that might feel like they know what they're doing, right? We can work on, trust, and how do you trust people to take on, a role that you've had for a period of time, right? How do you delegate that out, and how do you create that trust environment with that? We can work all the way through to what are the biological problems that you have that are creating some sort of barrier in your life, like how's your sleep, right? How are you regulating your blood sugar throughout the day? Are you eating? Do you have lunch, right, in your day? Because those can also impact the way that you're showing up emotionally, the way that you're showing up, cognitively, right? These are things that can impede you that are very easy fixes. Sleep is maybe a little bit more complicated, but most of the other ones we can really tackle. And I tailor a lot of my work to what it is that you're working through. And startups go through sort of waves of intensity, maybe, right? So maybe you're in the middle of a fundraise and we're working through, sort of the tactics of, how do I communicate with these investors, or how much do I share with my team and the ups and downs? Or we could be working through things that are, the emotional side of constant rejection, right? And how do you show up in a confident way when the entire fundraising process feels like a sea of rejection? And you have an emotional response to that. So we work through sort of a tailored version of whatever it is that is holding you back to becoming your most authentic version of a leader for you.
Wow. Okay. Oh, I have intrusive thoughts, right? So when you mentioned how do I fire a friend? Hey, Andrew, how do I fire a friend? Please enlighten me.
This is tough, right? In the early stages of companies, I watch a lot of founders make the mistake of treating your initial team like it is a family, like you guys are, the closest ever group of people. But families really don't break up. So over time,
Mm,
as your company grows, that's not really how a family functions. And so shifting those relationships to be more appropriate, right, in the workplace, like what is the closeness that is appropriate for it? Now, let's say you took a friend on, right, early, and they're not scaling. Maybe they were great from 0 to 1. Now you're in 1 to 2, and they are not growing with you, right? How do you separate out the relationship, the friendship, or maybe preserve it, while also saying, hey, this is the not? And I say that you end up turning it into a sort of tour of duty approach, right? Which is thanking them for sort of this 0 to 1 commitment, right? And the trust, and, really connecting on the relational piece of what they have provided. And also shifting over to, I think it's time for us to part ways this way. I want to preserve our friendship, right? And so
interesting.
I think a large part of it is naming it and prioritizing it, while also being okay saying, I think this portion of our relationship is closed or is
Yeah.
closing.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm thinking about like I might be off here, but I'm thinking about performance reviews, right? Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
sending signals that something is off, people will connect the dots. You don't have to be like from 0 to 100 and this relationship is over, right? We're not
I
friends
could
anymore.
not agree more. I do not think that firing should ever come as a surprise to anybody, right? Everybody should know where they stand. Everybody should have the option to change, right? Unless they've crossed some sort of, line, but should have the option to change and should understand that the door is maybe near um,
Mm,
before you
yeah.
exit it.
You
Firing
gotta
should never
send,
be a
yeah, you
surprise.
gotta send some signals. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, your work seems like pretty hands-on, customized. High touch, as you mentioned, not a cookie cutter. So I'm curious about one thing because I'm a coach as well. We already established that, and I see a lot of coaches out there. Sometimes they're advocating against burnout, but burning out themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wearing all the hats. So how do you think about capacity? So you don't stretch yourself too thin. You keep
Yes.
having your nights of sleep, eating properly, everything you mentioned, but for
Yep.
yourself.
So I think not just burnout, but across the board, you should be challenging yourself as a coach to grow in the same ways that you challenge your clients to grow, right? You should be showing up to your business in the same way you challenge your clients to show up to their business, right? Like turn the table on yourself. Prioritize what matters the same way you would expect them to prioritize what matters, right? Sort of the coach yourself through it and don't hold yourself to a different standard, right? You're not superhuman,
Mm,
right? You're not
okay.
immune to the things that you're talking to people that, telling them they're not immune to. So for me, I preach a lot on, sleep, right? Self
Mhm.
care, fun is not negotiable, right? You can't do hard things and also not be enjoying your life. And so I do that. So I prioritize all of that. I also think that connecting with the passion and impact of your work regularly and understanding where you're actually, I would say, like growing and learning and then applying it to it, I think is also really important. But putting yourself in the growth set and the growth mentality that you expect your clients to be in.
Gotta walk the talk. Okay. Gotta practice what
Absolutely.
you preach. Got
Mm-hmm.
it. Now, I'm curious about future, right? You've been 8 years in the game, and
Mm-hmm.
where are you taking all this?
Yeah.
Looking ahead, where do you see the business going? Are you thinking about scaling, hiring? Is there a next step you're excited about, Andrea?
Yeah. So I think over the last years, there's been an evolution in me and my approach in how I see this, and it's been influenced by all of the different people that I've had the honor to work with. And I think that in this next leg, I want to figure out how to articulate that and talk more about it so that the impact isn't so limited to my one-on-one coaching and that people who maybe aren't ready for coaching or can't afford coaching can sort of gain that, that knowledge and get a little bit of the benefits of coaching. I'd also like to expand beyond what I'm learning, or sorry, what I'm using day to day. I have a lot of personal interest in the people that I'm working with, like what was done during human development during their lives that created these extraordinary people who are incredibly ambitious and incredibly driven, right? What was sort of the push? Where does that come from? And can we actually develop that in the next generation or develop that in the emerging, people in our society? Is that repeatable, or are these people just truly extraordinary?
Interesting. It sounds like you are really really curious about what drives people to make certain types of decisions, right? The big ones.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, I'm curious too. Okay. Now, of course, whenever we're talking about, building something towards the next chapter, always something we're refining in the present. So what are you currently trying to improve or tighten up in your business right now?
Yeah. For me, I'm definitely in a scaling time. I finally have the capacity to be able to grow my practice. So I'm working on what that looks like in a way that doesn't burn me out, right? That still speaks to who I am. That still honors that journey.
Okay. I would love for us to step into sci-fi territory right now, if you don't mind. Back
Sure.
to the comic book nerd, right? So we have a time machine in front of us. We're going to have two stops. Okay, Andrea. First stop, you can go back in time 8 years when you started your business, right?
Yeah.
Morgan Advising. And you can give yourself one piece of business advice you
Hmm.
wish you knew back then that you know now,
Yeah.
right? What would that be?
Don't compare yourself to others, not in the way that you are, not in the stage in life that you're in, right? Stop looking out and start looking in.
Hmm. You know, when you say compare, I always think about social media, right? And how we sometimes, not that I do that often, but sometimes it happens. I see people doing. It's like comparing their inner selves to others people outer selves, like
Yeah.
like their life's perfect, or oh, I have a, for example, oh, there's a coach who's doing 20 million, right? And I'm not even close to that. And I'm like, oh my God, he's so successful and I'm not. But you never know what's the overhead. It could be 19.9 million in click funnels, you know? So it's, I think comparison is the thief of joy, right? At the end
Hmm.
of the day. Not sure if you agree with that.
I completely agree with that. I think that comparison steals your confidence, right? Like I think that and I think that confidence is the only thing that helps you build something authentic. And not this like artificial confidence that comes from, achievement, right? But the confidence that comes from like really feeling grounded in the belief that you are going to be successful or the belief that you are living completely in who you are. And I think that early on, I lived in my own version of imposter syndrome. And especially in the startup world, not being like a founder, I felt like, why would anybody listen to me, right? Why would this be a useful direction for me? And I think that I would have appreciated, and who knows whether or not I would have taken this advice, right? Or not. But I think that that person, that version of me, would have benefited from the advice of really look inside, do the inner work, find your own confidence, and don't pay any mind to where other people are or what they think of you.
Mm, love it. Okay. Now, second stop, Andrea. You can go back in time, and you might have several moments that pop up to your mind. I went to top of mind. Okay, the one that really clicked is like it's like a moment in time between those 8 years that you were like, oh, this is why I'm doing this. You know, you felt so fulfilled when
Mm-hmm.
you started a journey that clicked for a moment. Not sure if it's a client testimony. I'm not sure if it's like something you were able to achieve by building your own practice, you know, freedom, whatever that looks like. But
Mm-hmm.
what moment would that be?
So I think I've had a lot of those moments over time are what kept me going in this, right? Were sort of these moments where somebody said something. But just the other day, I closed out a long term client. We'd worked together for 4.5 years, and I said to him, you know, how do you feel on the coaching, right? How do you feel on this closeout? And he said, I really feel like I could not have done this without you. And it made me feel so in the right seat, right? So valued for that contribution, right? And in moments, I think like everyone, I question, right? I question, you know, my life or myself. But ultimately, I know that I am doing the thing that it brings me the most purpose and brings me the most fulfillment when I hear things like that.
Mm, okay.
And that
Now,
said, I do think he could have done it without me.
uh, well, I'm not sure. He told you the other way. Okay.
Right.
Now, I'm very curious about one thing. Okay, specifically towards who you serve and the startup world, because whenever I'm thinking about startups, I'm thinking about new stuff, new ideas. You know, breakthrough ideas, risk. Those are the words that pop up to my mind. And whenever I'm talking about new stuff right now, I'm thinking about AI too. Right. I know a lot of startups are doing that, not necessarily, but some are. So here's you, right? You're the person who helps the person behind the business idea. You're the one who's like helping leadership, right? You're helping them organize their whole body, like from sleeping to eating and all of that. So my question to you is, how important is to look at that side of things, the one you serve, right? Comparing to what we see people preaching about right now with the AI era, with trying to replace people, specifically in your industry. Is this still too relevant to ignore, or is AI going to take over even in the startup world?
Well, I think AI is absolutely infiltrating the startup world. Um, I don't think that, similar to smartphones or any other development of cars, right? Any other development of technology, um, we can't stop it, but we can choose the relationship we have with it. And there is a lot of AI fear, right? Fear that people won't adopt it quick enough, fear that it will replace different roles, and and I think both of those things will inevitably happen, right? We absolutely will have people that don't adopt it well or don't adopt it quick enough. We will absolutely have jobs that that are no longer because AI is going to take over. And I think the real challenge is figuring out how to keep going through the development of technology, this just being a new version of technology that is being developed in a way that you best can, right? Will your job be
Mm.
taken over? Probably. I've thought about my job in coaching, right? Whether or not that will be taken over. And I think to some degree, potentially, right? It will also emerge new access to roles, right? The ability for somebody to take my ideas or use the things that I work on and replicate it through AI so that it can reach more people, right? The fact that AI can listen to my sessions and then create takeaways and potentially in the future do additional coaching sessions based off of our initial session, right? I actually think that there's far more jobs that it will create and far more opportunities that it will create than it will limit. But the fear of what those are and that being unknown, I think is where people don't usually like unknown. People do relatively badly in uncertainty, and I think that this is an area of uncertainty that we all just need to
Mm.
embrace.
So it's almost like a hybrid approach. I had people like I talked in the space, in the coaching space. Well, one of them, he told me he was going to replace coaches with a chatbot, basically. Right,
Yeah.
that's one. The second one was like, I'm going to replace my entire team of 20 coaches with just AI. I wonder the accountability. Well, first of all, the accountability, right? That's the one thing that I wonder if it's replaceable, because sometimes showing up, right, and you're in front of them is one thing. It's different from like I can ignore chat gpt notifications, but if Andrea is waiting for me, it's kind of a different vibe, at least for me. Maybe I'm off.
Yeah.
The second thing is like he told me he was going to gamify it, right, in a way. I'm not sure, man. I like that's the thing. Sometimes I think about the prompt of what we don't know, right? You can call out your clients and stuff that they don't even realize they're doing wrong. And if you have to insert data on ChatGPT to ask the right questions sometimes. So
Yeah.
if you're biased, you're not going to ask the right questions. So do you think that's totally doable to replace a coach like 100%? I have my strong opinion on it, but I would love to hear yours.
So I think that the work coaches do is uniquely human. And I think there's a part of accountability that you're talking about, and there's also a part of human to human connection, right? That I think is not replaceable, at least not at the stage AI is right now.
Mm,
AI is incredibly validating. It's difficult to get AI to challenge you in different ways, and it's difficult to get AI to. I asked AI an ethical question recently, and it couldn't go both ways. It couldn't argue the other side. And the thing about a human is I don't have limitations like that, right? I can argue whatever side I want. And I think that there's a benefit for it being this role being uniquely human. I would love
mhm,
to see AI replace all my admin work,
mm,
you know? I would like all of that to just disappear into the world of AI, right?
right.
But I don't see it replacing the connection
Mm.
that I have with my clients, but I do hope that it impacts the reach.
Yeah, I saw this expert talking the other day. It was like the face to face interaction is going to be like the last ones. that's going to be
Mm-hmm.
replaced, right? I think it's more about what you said, like the admin work, the low value tasks, the repetitive tasks. So yeah, and those we can
Mm-hmm.
get rid of it because I hate them too. I'm right there with you. Okay. Okay, love that. Now, if someone listening and wants to connect with your follow your work, and Andrea, we're gonna have all the links
Yeah.
in the description. Okay, but where can people find you best and connect with you?
On LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to connect with me. Shoot me an email.
Okay. There were a few moments from this conversation today that really stayed with me. I'm highlighting them as we speak right now. Okay. The first one is the origin story and how curious you are about what drives people, right? And I've been the entire episode thinking about it. Like, you got Timmy, he's 5 years old, and he knows he
Yeah.
wants to be a firefighter. Come on, Timmy,
Mm-hmm.
how do you know that? Right? I'm almost calling out Timmy here. Fun fact, it's hard sometimes, right? When you realize some people out there have all figured out, and I haven't figured out sometimes some stuff. And I think most of us didn't, right? But what drive them to that certainty of sometimes making those decisions is something that really, really gets me curious as well. So I'm right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Love the fact how honest you were about that the coaching side was almost felt like a fake job. I love fake job. I love that term. It's like, because it is what it is, right? It's not, it feels like when you're so used to a boxed in career, a way to go to do things and blah, blah, blah. And oh, that's my career, the ladder. I'm going to up here in the ladder, I'm going to be successful and all that, following the
Yeah.
plan, right? And then you implode the plan and you're like, oh my God, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And to me, it felt like a fake job as well, too, for a certain period. I just haven't found the right words. But thank you for giving me those. Okay, really like that. I love the fact why you're so inclined to work with startups too. Like, the main reason, at least the one I picked up on, was that they are more relaxed. They're more, I want to say coachable. It didn't say coachable. You were like, they're more open. They have this growth mindset. At the end of the day, not so formal. And I hate formal, man. I worked with a formal scenario industry, blah, 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 like consulting, banking. It's boring. And I love
Mm-hmm.
to have real talk with real people. So I'm right there with you as well on the startup guys. And last but not least, I would say is like, don't compare, right? I think comparison, it is the thief of joy, right? If we compare ourselves, it's impossible to be happy because we are always having a new benchmark that it's sometimes unachievable. Second, sometimes it's not even reality. It's just something we came up with as an idea of reality for someone else, and we don't
Yeah.
even know. They might struggle, right? And we're not even aware
Mm-hmm.
of it. So this is just my long-winded way of saying, Andrea, that I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate you being
Thank
here
you.
and sharing so openly today. It was great having
Thank
you on.
you. Thank you. It was great chatting.
That's it for this episode. This episode, as well as this podcast, was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help business owners elevate their business to 6, 7, and 8-figure years, all without burning out. If you're looking to grow your business, as well as get the time freedom that you are looking for, visit us at joinpurplecircle.com and see what we can do to help you and your business.